try this again. See if it works out. What happened is contingent upon participation. So I'm getting set up so I can see the chat. And right. We're live, and I am merely waiting for participants to guide the proverbial Assassin's Creed Discovery Tour COVID-19 Special Edition Platinum. Hosted by yours truly, DB Gaming. My cute and cuddly furry co-host is downstairs with Mommy, who is also homesick today. So I thought I'd have a little bit of fun in ancient Egypt, guided by folks that are watching this, or that would watch it. I am having internet connection issues, so that might be a problem. I'll send a test message through. I wonder if I need to break it in by typing something, but hey, there we go. All right. I will open up the menu choices we have. Lovely, lovely. We've exhausted Egypt and the pyramids already. There's some stuff in Alexandria still, the Moseion, the Serapeum, and the Hippodrome. And in daily life, we got lots of stuff. And then we have the Romans. Daily life looks more promising for fun content. But I will let you direct how this goes. With daily life, we have temples and rituals, temples and priests, buildings, building ancient Egypt, workers and transport, agriculture and seasons, cultivation, domesticated animals, medicine, leather and linen. Okay, temples and rituals. There we go. I'm gonna go ahead and I think I'll reset the tour. Because we really didn't cover all that much. Hello, hello. There we go, sorry. Oh, it's alright, I'll try it. Well, we may have to back up and read this, but temple page record. Okay, cool.
Welcome to Temples and Rituals of Ancient Egypt. During rituals and festivals, the god was carried on a solar barge between the areas of a temple or the temples of different cities. Funerary carvings and paintings covering thousands of years, as well as the Book of the Dead, depict the same ship and oar design. Solar barges have been uncovered near or within several pharaohs' tombs. They were intended to carry the pharaoh into the afterlife.
Hey, lady, what are you doing after this parade? Something happened with the sound. I can't hear the flute playing anymore.
Ancient Egyptians believed that Ra, the sun god, traveled the skies in a boat known as the solar barge. The solar barge was believed to cross over to mythological lands. Ancient Egyptians believed that Ra, the sun god, traveled the skies in a boat known as the solar barge. The solar barge was believed to cross over to mythological lands.
It's just a representation of a god put on there. It's a solar barge. But I think there were occasions, like a pharaoh's funeral, where a much bigger sedan would set up, something like this, with the solar barge. And I think it might have been part of the tomb offering.
The god Ra believed mankind was conspiring against him. He ordered Sekhmet, the lion-headed war goddess, to kill all humans. To his chagrin, Ra quickly realized that with all humans gone, there would be no one left to worship him. In order to stop the rampaging Sekhmet, beer was brewed and dyed red with pomegranate juice to resemble blood. Sekhmet drank every drop of the brew she could find, eventually passing out drunk. When she awoke, she was calmer, and her lion visage had changed into Bastet. The festival of drunkenness was celebrated in honor of that myth.
There's a glitch or something that made it so I can't hear the drums and the flutes anymore. That's kind of a drag.
Unlike the daily rituals that took place in the temple and were performed by priests, festivals allowed the entire population of the city to participate. Festivals helped mark the passing of the seasons in the agricultural calendar. In reflecting the cycles of life, festivals offered a sense of consistency and structure for the regular citizens, thus reinforcing the sense of order that pharaohs were to provide for the citizens of Egypt as part of their godly duties.
Oh, let me know if this helps, because I'm practically deep-throating the mic now. Let me know if the mic is too close for that matter. Might have something to do with proximity. I don't want it to be too close to my nose, because you'll hear every exhale from my schnoz. I do notice that the mic seems rather weak on the bit here. Oh well.
The importance of these festivals is demonstrated by their longevity. Records show that Osiris festivals occurred for more than 2,000 years. Some festivals serve to reinforce state control and promote the king's reign. Both the Opet and Set Jubilee festivals were specifically intended to celebrate the renewal of the king's power.
Well, in real life, when the festival took place, there was a lot more going on than this. There was drinking, and for nosy people that wanted to go into the tall grass, catch people engaging in things that usually cause unplanned pregnancies.
The temple hierarchy consisted of high priests, several types of priests, scribes, and servants. The high priest was known as the prophet. Some divinities had up to 4 prophets, and they were the ones to perform the most advanced and complex rituals.
Okay, evidently providing instruction of why the world does what it does.
Egyptian priests were not confined to solely religious tasks, and in fact had crucial roles in Egypt's administration, most of which served to reaffirm the pharaoh as the proper vessel for the gods. Their focus within the temple was centered on the proper conduct of daily divine rituals, rather than as custodians of dogma or the indoctrination of individuals.
It's like Seshperanks.
Scribes were custodians of the sacred sciences. Some priests were associated with the funeral rites and were considered the group with medical knowledge. The servants of the Ka were low-ranking priests who carried food and offerings in funerary rituals. Lector priests were distinguished by their ability to read, and their main duty was to recite specialized religious texts in both temple and funerary rituals.
I believe it would be the lector priest outside preaching the Egyptian gospel to the people on the front there. Look at this guy setting up clipping issue here. Setting up oils and stuff to be rubbed into the inanimate gold-plated gods. Some of them were solid, depending on the wealth of the temple.
Priests and all the officials who served the temple worked only 3 months a year, with each period separated by a quarter of inactivity, at least within the temple compound. Each outgoing group handed over the temple and their tools to the newcomers. Only the high priesthood remained in permanent office within the temple. The most sacred part of the temple was referred to as Jesser Jesseru, the Holy of Holies. The most sacred inner sanctuary was where the shrine to the temple deity was located. Only priests were allowed within. Offerings were given and rituals unseen by even the pharaoh were performed. While the team chose to allow any character access to this space in some game temples, normally it was reserved for priests alone.
I was just about to say that. This was not a place for the public. Not even this area had public access.
Pharaohs and their priests often chose the site of these sacred temples because of some mythological connection or an alignment with the cardinal points and certain stars. Once selected, a foundation ritual was performed. The pharaoh was required to complete 10 steps in the ritual, which required a mix of offerings as well as specific construction techniques. Once the temple was complete, construction of the chamber containing the shrine, or naos, began.
Sometimes this was similar to something like the cutting of the ribbon or breaking a champagne bottle. I don't know what the punishment would have been. I think there would have been something akin to, or it depends if you were stealing anything, if you just went in there. Well, there were mafia-esque components to the social hierarchy. Sometimes you'd wind up in the belly of a crocodile, but it depended on the type of priest, their disposition. I mean, they were all individuals. My first presupposition, depending on the disposition of the priest in question, it would probably be equivalent to being ostracized and shamed, and that they would probably have to go through great lengths to purify and clean the inside because somebody who shouldn't have been there went there.
The naos was where the god statue stood. The representation of the deity was usually in stone or wood and decorated with gold, silver, and precious stones. Smaller temples had only one naos, while larger complexes, such as the Temple of Karnak, had many chambers to honor gods, such as Amun, Ptah, and Osiris. Each statue was believed to be a receptacle for the presence or essence of the god's Ka, enabling it to take a physical form. Through the statue, the god came to the shrine to eat, drink, and communicate with the pharaoh, or with the priests standing in for the pharaoh.
I wonder, I'm guessing naos or naos is a Greek word. I am curious what the actual ancient Egyptian word was. I'm going to see if I can look that up. But if there's a pink granite monolith that's being shown here, that granite came from Aswan. Could not have come from anywhere else in the world. Even today, people get pink granite countertops. And if they get that, it's from Aswan, and they usually pay a hefty sum for that. And I'm sorry I was so vague about the punishment. I don't know what the punishment would be, but I'm sure it depended on the behavior of the priest. Because they held, as individuals, especially the high priest, they held a hell of a lot of power. And some of that power revolved around life and death. And if you weren't a friend of a priest, and the priest was angry with you or something, your life was complicated significantly unless your friends exceeded the power of that of the priest. And I'm not surprised it's lagging because I think my internet might not be doing very well. We've had some less than desirable weather. Man, this is louder than normal. Like the background. I guess it's time to do the next one, Temples and Priests. So let's just go there. I have no idea. I've got no idea what they're going on about at all. And this looks like, oh, Memphis. Mennefer, otherwise known as Enib Hedge. The White Walls. I like Memphis. It's pretty much one of my favorite places.
Welcome to Temples and Priests.
I'm a bit of a stickler for pronunciation. I like Amun more than Amun. Just the way I am. Tutankhamun sounds better than Tutankhamun.
From its foundation, the city of Memphis favored worship of the god Ptah. The main temple of Ptah was known as Hutkaptah, meaning Palace of the Ka of Ptah. The name of the temple, translated into Greek as Aegyptos, would eventually evolve into the modern name Egypt.
In 1997, Jean-Claude Gauvin do that based on scant archaeological evidence and pictures drawn, crude pictures drawn, and descriptions made in writing. And I think I've alluded to this before, but I think he is the only person in the world who does this kind of work. And I don't know if there will be anybody to take his place when he's done. But I love the look of this place.
Temples were the center of religious, political, and economic life in ancient Egypt. These sacred places were viewed as the literal home of the gods and goddesses. As such, every aspect of them required care and reverence, all of which was accomplished through elaborate ritual.
I love how the bars get raised more and more with these games, better details, just more content and stuff. So I look forward to when things can get really unbelievably elaborate and exceed the wildest expectations even of people that use these as the standard.
Located in the center of Memphis, the Temple of Ptah was the most prominent and imposing building in the city. The long walkway leading toward the temple, known as the Dromos, was guarded by rows of sphinxes. The entire sacred area was designed to keep the statue of the god protected, deep within the sacred enclosures that surrounded it.
I wonder what they're made of. I'm assuming basalt. And I love the details. I don't know whose cartouche that is. But I love the details that they put into this. I agree, Shada. And I like how the people don't look overly mechanical. I mean, they look mechanical, but not to the point of being horribly immersion breaking. And I will stop looking at these in just a minute. I just wanted to share this as me being the geek that I am. This is the kind of thing I like to see. I'm going to go back to first person view. The stairs get a little bouncy with this, but horses were used before camels in ancient Egypt. They didn't use camels in ancient Egypt till about 700 BCE. So for 3,000 years of Egyptian existence and cultural proliferation, there were no camels involved. And I love the details they put into these, although there is some redundancy. But usually with these, if you see a head chiseled off somebody in particular, it was an earnest attempt to mess up their eternity.
The Dromos opened into a courtyard, with the surrounding portico graced with columns carved to resemble palm trees. During special festivals, the general population was allowed to enter this location, but under no circumstances would they be allowed into the sacred spaces beyond the courtyard.
Could priests go in where? I mean, just like any priest, or like if they ran the temple? Oh man, the well, religious power and political power are, especially in ancient Egypt, it's hard to separate the two. They were extremely influential. If you would consider the pharaoh to be something like a president, a head of state, but the priests were like the corporate interests that bolstered the power of the pharaoh. Would be Episcopal prospects. Well, there's a cow. Hathor.
The Memphis Alabaster Sphinx was discovered in 1912,
Granite, not
almost
alabaster.
completely buried in water and sand. 8 meters in height and weighing in at roughly 90 tons, it is still mounted on its original pedestal. Though it is called the Alabaster Sphinx, it was in fact carved from common calcite rock, which is similar in appearance and texture to alabaster.
Okay. Well, this picture looks like it could have been alabaster. But this, to me, that looks exactly like Aswan granite. In fact, how this is modeled is exactly Aswan granite. This is not alabaster. Alabaster had kind of a whitish, translucent, beige color. And well, the priests in Eneb Hedge were, they could, I don't know how free they were to go into the holiest of holies, but they had their jobs within the temple complex. And people went to the temples to get, I think, their grain rations. There were bazaars and stuff, but grain was the currency. Oh, A-S-W-A-N, Aswan. But yeah, this is it. If you look closely at this, and you don't even have to look that closely at it, I knew it was the model of this is Aswan granite, which wouldn't surprise me that they would make a granite sphinx at any point. There must be one. But granite was an extraordinary material, and it was used for sarcophagi. I'll write it just for extra clarification. Followed by acute pronunciation.
Erosion has destroyed the original engravings, making it difficult to determine when it was created. Egyptologists believe that its facial likeness resembles Amenhotep II, and so it could have been sculpted somewhere between 1700 and 1400 BCE. It is believed that this monument once stood outside of the Temple of Ptah and was integrated into subsequent extensions to the complex.
I don't mean to be a jerk, but I don't see how somebody could look at that and say, oh, that must be alabaster. It looks like sand, not even sandstone. I mean, maybe I mean, somebody say, hey, DB, what's that made of? My first thought might have been limestone. I'm not an expert at all.
The size of the imposing sculpture reflects the importance it had to the temple during the New Kingdom. This Sphinx is one of the few remaining artifacts from the ruins of Memphis to survive.
The water table in Memphis is quite high, so any excavation that would take place has to be done in mud. which is sad because Memphis was older than Wasset. Thebes. Enebhedge / Mennefer. Enebhedge was the White Walls.
In Egyptian culture, some animals were associated with gods, while others were considered to be living gods. The Apis bull was believed to be a divine entity. The earliest mention of the Apis bull in ancient Egypt goes back as far as the first Egyptian dynasty.
It would have been a lot cleaner when it was newer, I think prior to Persian and Greek and Roman control, there was probably a lot more focus on cleanliness. But, these walls were built and looked like this. Like literally 2000 BCE. So these were ancient even by the time the Ptolemaic dynasties arrived. In fact, during this time period, we're closer to the time of Cleopatra than Cleopatra was to the building of the pyramids. Whoops, I think I went to the wrong spot. Well, that was all ritual. That got cleaned up or collected and probably in some cases reused. They would put there for appearance and probably also to make it smell nice. Because I don't imagine this being too much of a nosegay. But I do wonder how their incense smelled, what exactly they used to make it.
Originally the symbol of fertility, the Apis bull was linked to the god Ra, with the image of the sun carried between its horns. Later it was associated with Osiris, the ruler of the underworld, thus becoming the funerary divinity Osorapis. During the 18th dynasty in Memphis, the Apis bull's association with the city's deity earned it the title Herald of Ptah. The Apis bull was so revered that even Alexander the Great, upon his arrival in Memphis, gave honor to Apis.
And he also knew it was the political thing to do. And realize how much gold they had to make things like this. There's the one.
The Apis bull lived with its harem in a sacred barn located in an enclosure in the Temple of Ptah. Each bull bore 29 signs representative of its divinity. Among them, the bull had an eagle-shaped mark on its back, a double tail hair, and a scarab-shaped mark under the tongue. The signs were intended to correspond with the lunar cycle. After its death, Egyptians would search for its reincarnated form among the livestock.
And I wonder how uneasy they felt when a suitable one took its time in presenting itself. If that was considered a bad omen. But yeah, they anointed the Apis bull with perfume and bejeweled it, or them. And gave it a place to sleep or rest. The Persian, I think it was Cambyses, he was rather displeased at the lack of regard shown him, and when they were showing so much reverence to the bull, Cambyses took a dagger and mortally wounded it and said, "Well, it's flesh. Look at your god now, it's bleeding all over the place, it'll be dead in a minute. LOL." He didn't really work on endearing himself to the Egyptian people. He wanted to terrify them. And Alexander kind of played along and became so Egyptian that they said, "Oh, wait, he's a pharaoh. Let's make him a pharaoh. Let's love this guy. He knows what he's doing. He's one of us."
Like other living divinities, the mortal incarnation of the Apis bull was prayed to, and when it died, it was given a luxurious funeral, which included mummification. Until the reign of Ramses II, the Apis bulls were buried in individual graves in Saqqara. During the 26th dynasty, the bodies of the bulls were buried in enormous stone vats in the underground corridors of the Serapeum of Memphis.
There's literally nothing left of Memphis because of the water table. I mean, it is underground. I don't think they could even excavate it if they had 200 years to do it. Hello, hello, hello. Can I climb up here, please? Come on, seriously? Give me a break. Like, go here. Well, I'd love to, but I didn't really see a doorway. Hold on. There might have been a doorway, and I was too blind to see it. Oh, there's a closed door. Yeah. Lovely way to get around. Memphis is probably my favorite city, but Thebes is also a cool place. People look like they're learning. It's like a sesh pedank or a sesh. took off the headset so that I would not sneeze into the mic.
Ancient Egyptians believed that temple rituals were essential to maintain order in the cosmos and allow communication between humans and gods. The pharaoh was required to bring offerings as part of a twofold promise made to the gods, to remain a just ruler and to prevent chaos from entering Egypt.
I like the way it sounds through here sometimes. Like the way the sunlight goes through the entrance.
Details of the ceremonies found on temple walls provide a thorough overview of the stages of the daily ritual. Performed 3 times a day to mirror human mealtimes, each step of the highly symbolic ceremony was accompanied by specific recitations, many of which referred to mythical events. The high priest would first awaken the sleeping god with a chant. Then the seals of the shrine's doors were broken and the bolts drawn back. The act of swinging open the doors was a symbolic gesture where sight was granted to the deity. The priest would then bow and kiss the ground.
Whoops.
The god was then washed with incense-infused water and its mouth rinsed with mineral salts. The cleansing was followed by adorning the statue with jewels and royal garments. The final ritual required the priest to sweep away any footprints in order to prevent evil from approaching the god.
Now I don't know how to say this. This is the kind of stuff that gets discovered. But the stuff that was really bejeweled and looked amazing and was used by the wealthier temples probably got melted down into gold bars or, gold ingots or jewelry used by Spain.
Heredity was the primary source of new recruits. Rarely was an outsider allowed this position. At the top of the temple hierarchy was the high priest. Each temple dedicated to a god had at least one high priest devoted to its care and service. During the Ptolemaic dynasty, one family held the position of high priest in Memphis for almost 300 years.
Which was about as long as the Ptolemaic dynasty. I think it must have happened. But I think if they wanted to retain a smell, they knew that they had to bathe and put the oil on afterwards. But I would be hard-pressed to think that it would be impossible. But if you did do something like that, you were using oils that were quite rare and costly, and it would take a lot to do that. I mean, even now, myrrh is worth more than gold in terms of volume or weight.
High priest candidates made their way up the ranks of the temple hierarchy. The one chosen to occupy the lofty position of high priest was usually confirmed by the pharaoh. Several of the high priests were also important officials in the government. Families sharing the highest priesthood titles tended to make many alliances, thereby gaining more land and wealth. Shifting balances of power sometimes resulted in more or less open conflicts between the priesthood and the pharaohs.
Yeah, if you were a pharaoh and the priest didn't like you, your chances of assassination went up considerably.
In the 21st dynasty, Thebes became the capital of an almost entirely theocratic government. The city was headed by king priests who spoke and governed in the name of the god Amun, in open opposition to the ruling pharaohs. These king priests caused a massive decentralization of power, known as the Third Intermediate Period.
Also, I don't know this. I'm presupposing a bit, but if somebody wanted to take a bath in incense water themselves, I think it would be considered. There is a level of decadence in the upper classes, but I think it would be considered superfluous because the best you could do is brag to somebody that you were bathing in it. Rather than, hey, I can tell by your smell you were bathing in incense water.
The educational institution in ancient Egypt was known as the House of Life. Attended by the offspring of the elite and the clergy, it was a place tailored to the social status of its attendees. The earliest references to this type of institution date back to royal decrees of the Old Kingdom.
The Egyptian word for the House of Life was per Ankh. And if you were a scribe there, the Egyptian word for scribe was sesh. And their equivalent to a wizard was a scribe from the House of Life, sesh per Ankh. And in Coptic Egyptian, the same word exists today. That's how they figured it out. Ankh means life. And this guy's a big deal. He has a leopard skin and a gold-plated, I guess it's a helmet, ceremonial helmet.
Only two known centers have been uncovered. One in the abandoned city of Akhetaten, and one at the temple of Ramses II on the west bank of Thebes. Inscriptions uncovered in those locations mention the names and titles of people who were connected with the House of Life, such as a chief physician and many scribes. It is presumed that by the late kingdom, every temple had a House of Life.
I goofed here. Just a moment. I'm going to put a link to something that sort of serves as a bit of a similar repository. Yeah, describe with the sesh. The House of Life is per Ankh. It is quite a elite group gathering here. The leopard skins, they were up there. That's a physics problem with that hair.
The House of Life offered training for the elite, destined for occupations such as astronomers, doctors, veterinarians, diplomats, architects, translators, or theologians. Some institutions focused on specific disciplines, making them a central hub for the country.
But the House of Life was just a perank. The Seshperunk were just like the wizard or scribe that abided in there. They were like the dream interpreters. Like people who, I don't know if they gave sermons per se, but spoke at events that involved parading the gods.
Not limited to instruction for young students, the House of Life was a source of reference for many scholars, with rooms dedicated to papyri of many disciplines. Because papyri were preserved there, the Greco-Romans referred to the House of Life as a library.
I think if something was extraordinarily beautiful or well crafted, it was either hoarded as treasure or even melted down. So the stuff that gets discovered was the stuff that was discarded. And if you want me to bring on the daylight, I certainly can. Sometimes the night appearance looks cool. Night in the desert is, if you're staring at the sky, it's magnificent. If you're staring at the ground and the rocks, it's the most desolate, dark, drab place. But I love the way some of these temples look. Shrines look.
Ancient Egyptian economy was based on an unequal system of redistribution of goods. The state of Egypt collected the crops, and the temples distributed them throughout the provinces. Since the only people capable of counting and ensuring a fair redistribution were the educated scribes, this meant that the temples played a pivotal role in this process.
I wonder what this smells like, aside from the body odor of sweating visitors. Well, why would it be embarrassing if you've never read it before? If you said something in Farsi and I tried to type it, I would probably, my assessment might look ridiculous, though I could probably pronounce it authentically if you wrote it is.
There are records of pharaohs making offerings of large tracts of land and animals to temples in order to maintain their favor. Ramses III offered generous gifts to the temple of Amun in Karnak in such a manner.
Ramses the Great was, in my opinion, for the most part, a glorified piece of shit. I'm not going to pull any punches. He's a stupid son of a bitch who chiseled off the names of everyone he could and put his name on everything. So a lot of monuments that were made, we could never tell who for sure commissioned them, because that piece of shit asshole chiseled their names out and put his on there. He was a narcissist of the highest order. And he was a human being. He was, I mean, I use that term as a consolation. He had a redeeming quality, a few. He's not like Donald Trump, who does not have even an atom of redeeming quality. He doesn't have any human quality. Ramses dearly loved his wife, and the magnificence of her tomb was comparable to his. And I think that he did initiate the first documented peace treaty with the Hittites. And yeah, he was. They call him the chiseler, for being a plagiarist. I think Egyptian is all its own. I mean, Egyptian it's a dead language. The only thing that remains of the ancient Egyptian words, I mean, they're very scarce. I think the word desert, the ancient Egyptian word for desert, was deshret, which meant the red land. I think the word desert comes from that. It's attributed to Latin. You know, there may be a few words. Chemistry. The Greek word chemistry. You know, when the Greeks were talking to the Egyptians, what do you call this process of mixing chemicals and making these metals? Because it was the Egyptians that was showing how to build bronze and melt copper and all that. They just said it part of the black land of what we do. I don't know what their word for it was specifically, but the Egyptian called their land Kemet, the black land. So Kemet and chemistry.
Palaces, warehouses, and granaries were built inside the temple compound to better control the redistribution of goods. The size of the recorded numbers of goods, combined with every other function filled by temples, only serves to confirm their might as economic, religious, and political centers of power within Egypt.
If you want to see if I can pronounce something in Farsi, I'd be happy to give it a go. I'm usually pretty good at guessing if the transliteration is good enough. But I love virtually taking a stroll in Memphis and just checking the place out. They did such a lovely job of the details. Oops. They don't like me trying to get off on an angle. But I like the artistry on the buildings. These look like pomegranates. Yeah, that's pomegranates. And the sun will be up soon. I don't know if that would be supremely worth waiting for, but one thing I've never done consciously was see where the sun shone as it was rising. It's starting to come up. So come up from there. It'll shine this away. Oh, they're absolutely lovely. I love just hanging out sometimes. I like the environmental noise. I like the look, and you just kind of feel like a tourist breathing it in. I wish I could toggle these points off so that I can focus more on the details, but I also wonder what this was like before the Greeks came and put their soldiers and spies into everything. You know, a bunch of soldiers strolling through the temple complexes and keeping order and intimidating, basically letting the people know that there's nothing you can do that we won't see. But Eneb Hedge, oops, these folks are sleeping. And this was the place where you could sleep to get the best fresh air and air conditioning, because Egypt was not a cool place in terms of temperate climate. I consider Egypt to be a very cool place, at least ancient Egypt. I mean no offense when I say that I wouldn't be quite so eager to see the ruins of it. Although I would certainly enjoy doing so. Alright, let's see. That was... let's see. Somebody's freaking out. I heard somebody hollering like, whoa! Okay, workers. Temples and rituals, priests, workers, and agriculture. Animals, okay. I went back to see what's next, and what's next is workers, agriculture. Is it, sorry. I literally have to go back because I can't remember. Workers and agriculture. Workers, here we go. Sorry for the delay there.
Welcome to Workers and Transport.
That's obviously Greek construction. But there's a scratch in the paint of the romanticism when you envisage the toiling in the desert heat. Yeah, there's quite a delay. Let me try something here. Let me give this another go. Alright. Hopefully this will be a bit more current on my end as far as your typing. But, they are.
Whether workers were employed for the pyramid construction or at the quarries, the government supplied food and housing. Workers for the pyramids and royal necropolises were housed in more permanent villages, such as the famous Deir el-Medina. Quarry workers had more temporary lodgings. All skill levels were needed and utilized, from basic work hands to prepare the gypsum, to brickmakers and sand carriers, to skilled stonemasons to shape the blocks.
I do wonder what this looked like originally, because weathering and thousands of years takes a toll. But I thought that those ruins at Deir el-Medina looked pretty darn good considering their age.
Skilled architects and engineers were employed year-round, while support labor were often farmers who worked on the quarries or construction during the Nile's flood season. The basic laborers were hardworking and versatile. Many may have been farmers who joined the construction during the off-season. Hieroglyphs found in the work villages listed assigned job titles.
Rise and shine.
Archaeological research shows that no food was stored or prepared on site, but instead workers received abundant rations of bread, beer, and meat. These rations were taken care of by an administration outside the village. Medical treatment was also available for those who were injured.
So I had to take a drink of tea. I thought that basket looks rather nifty. And I'm actually wondering if that's original contents.
While some quarries were close to the Nile, others were located across the desert and required long expeditions. These expeditions were sanctioned by the state. They involved complex logistics and required many participants. Transporting a block by land meant that workers had to overcome the weight and friction of the load. To solve this, they first dug a track in the ground. This path was sometimes reinforced with rails upon which a sled, used to ferry the blocks, would be pulled.
I'm surprised they didn't use the wheel to more effect, but the wheel in the matter of moving something like this is a double-edged sword in a sense, because it can roll backwards as easily as it can roll forward. This was not good for your lungs, or your back, or your finger, or your hand, or your wrists. These people had short lifespans.
Whenever possible, blocks were toppled from a higher elevation onto the sled. Workers then poured water onto the clay at the front of the sled, creating a slick surface to more easily move the load. It wasn't until the New Kingdom that animals were used to tow the burden.
Yeah, it would not be an admirable position And imagine if you were in charge of this. Like, say, moving a great statue, right? Let's say you are in charge with moving it from where it was made or from one place to another, and you pick a spot where there's just a little too much elevation to try to drag it through. Something sinks and it falls down and breaks. How would you like to explain that?
During flood season, the Nile was at its largest and deepest, which allowed the transportation of the heaviest and biggest loads. Quarries close to the river had troughs dug out to deliver the stones to the shoreline. Harbors and wharfs situated at the river's edge allowed the transfer of materials and supplies. Harbor warehouses accommodated additional stocks of stone so that they were available for the winter sailing season.
I appreciate that to have the kind of intrigue necessary for a game like Assassin's Creed, you need to pick a time period like this with the clash of Western culture. I can appreciate that dynamic, but there were still enough intrigue to be going on with in earlier times. And I noticed with the game like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, it's all about Greece. I love being able to look at the tombs and stuff and the environment, but there is heavy Greek and Roman influence and architecture and things that are going on. I would love to have had duties as a Magi in the period maybe, I don't know, a couple hundred years after the pyramids were built or just before the Pharaoh Pepi or King Pepi, before the first intermediate period.
The Uwadi el-Jarf papyri detail a limestone load intended for the Khufu pyramid that weighed in at 70 to 80 tons, or 30 blocks. One papyrus is a fragment from a foreman's notes taken while working on the Great Pyramid. It details the transportation of limestone blocks from the Tura quarries to the construction site of the pyramid. The other papyri are shipping logs containing archives of the sailors assigned to sail the Red Sea and the Nile.
That was an incredible find.
Stone cargo generally weighed 15 tons per boat, amounting to roughly 6 or 7 blocks per trip. For heavier loads such as obelisks, monolithic pillars, or gigantic statues, larger boats were used. These transports are the ones typically showcased on temple walls.
Nice graffiti there. Some Greek. It looks more recent. I like watching boats stop and go. I have a slight resentment to this being the period where Egypt was essentially gasping its last breath after being mortally wounded 300 years before. even though they call it Ptolemaic Egypt, it stopped being Egypt as soon as, honestly, as soon as the Persians came.
River transportation was the most efficient way to ferry stone blocks between the quarry and the construction site. Blocks were transported by flotillas of several types of boats. The most detailed illustration of transport by river is a relief of Queen Hatshepsut's barge with an accompanying flotilla.
That might have been a bit hyperbolic. Well, kiddo, I'm sensing that you're a bit preoccupied with other matters, so did you want to continue, or do you want me to call it a stream? I'm going to put the ball in your court. This is not my favorite scenery, to be honest. The mix of the Greek architecture and the... Because I'd be happy to go on with the agriculture one, which might provide a slightly more cheery scenery. Okay. Just going to give a last little aerial view, courtesy of Senu. And man, oh man, those are heavy blocks. This must be pretty close to where I was for me to zap here so quickly.
Welcome to Agriculture and Seasons.
Seriously, I like the details so much that it just hanging out here is fun for me. I don't expect other people to have the same appreciation for it, but they did such a wonderful job with this, recreating it.
While crops were cultivated in different oases around the desert, most of the arable lands were near the Nile. Two types of cereal grain were cultivated, barley and an ancient wheat known as emmer. These two key ingredients contributed in establishing bread and beer as the staple of the Egyptian diet and the basis of its economy.
Beer and bread. A good way to have a enjoyable but short lifespan. If those are your two main calorie sources. I know they must have eaten a tremendous amount of fish, and they had vegetables, onions, garlic. But I think one of the big reasons that the general lifespan was 35-ish years was because of beer and bread being the staples they were.
The Ptolemaic era created an agricultural revolution with the introduction of advanced agricultural techniques and new grain types such as rice, durum wheat, and pearl millet. The resulting agricultural mass production greatly increased the economy of ancient Egypt. It also prompted the development of storage and transportation, allowing long-distance trade with other regions.
And that's not difficult to understand how that happened, because the Greeks were all about mercantile trading. Durum wheat, it's a different consistency. It produces a different consistency with the bread that gets eaten. Let me write it down. It's durum wheat is it's the kind of wheat that you would use to make, I think, noodles, or the best textured noodles, or dumplings. They have a pathway that they prefer the character take that I just like. Going through the fields. There's a place in this game that I would have loved to have lived at. It's in a place called Sais. Kind of an estate house. It overlooks the lake and this town square.
Both bread and beer rations were part of a system of barter payment. The state used those goods to pay wages for those who worked in the quarries and at the construction sites. Beer was so important to ancient Egyptians, they had a goddess of beer brewing, Tenenet. Tenenet is seen in many paintings and sculptures with beer, and women are depicted as the primary beer makers.
Beer brewing, bread making, the only weaving, those were considered more female jobs. With harvesting, the women, I think a lot of them were out in the field with the men, because that was currency, literally and figuratively. It was a barter economy, but food was important. You wanted to get all you could. Didn't want to waste anything. Well, there's a lot in this game that's not quite perfect with its historicity. But women could go to the market in ancient Egypt, whereas the Greek women could not. Women had a lot more freedom. There was a lot more emphasis on equality, and women were more highly regarded in Egypt than Greece or Rome.
In order to increase agricultural production, fertile land was divided into plots and large agricultural villages were encouraged. The state and temples were the biggest landowners. Depending on the region, fertile land was managed by civil servants or rented to individuals. Ancient Egyptians relied on rudimentary tools for land cultivation. Soil was broken down with hoes, and wing plows were used to make furrows.
I've chilled over here before, and if memory serves, there was one time I saw these guys or similar guys drinking. A dog came up to him and he gave him a sip. Whatever it was he was drinking. There's a kitty. Yeah, it looked kind of sneaky, didn't it? Looked like he's about to do something predatory, like violent toward the kitty. And this would be a very, oh, that's a dog going potty. Why would they depict that? Dogs don't do that in real life. On carpet or anything like that.
Oh.
Some bung holes. Greeks. I would love to have them redo a game like this set in an much earlier time period with an interaction similar to Red Dead Redemption where you can wave to people and establish your reputation and stuff. That would be grand. And influence the world around you. I don't think I could be pulled away from a game like that. Some smart ass thing. Design it, man. If you can think it, you can do it. Sure, it's that easy, isn't it?
The 3 seasons known as Akhet, Peret, and Shemu corresponded to a specific phase of the agricultural process and the river's natural changes. Akhet was the time of the flood, beginning with the appearance of the star Sirius in July. Peret was the time when lands were cultivated, plowed, and sown. This fell between October and November. Shemu ran from May to September and was when harvesting and taxation began.
If there's just a bit of history, the kind of taxation that took place was rather ingenious as far as a method, but it was also kind of, I would say, overly cunning and potentially callous. Oh, a kitty followed me up here. But they had, I don't know what the perfect word is, but I guess you could call it a Nileometer. And it measured how high the flood was. So when the Nile reached a certain height, as long as it wasn't past a critical flood stage, like if the flood overwhelmed the area too much, you weren't going to have a good sowing and harvest. But depending on how high the Nile rose and how much property you managed, you were expected to provide a certain amount for taxation. And for thousands of years, that's pretty much how that was done. Which I thought was a very cunning method for determining taxes. And probably the best way to do it, because if it was a percentage, a person could have said, oh, this year wasn't a very good year. When they had the whole, well, mathematically, you should be able to grow this much, and this is how much ours is going to be. If you want to continue to remain a citizen and live, you're going to need to fork over this much. Well, I think these are granaries. I think these are for pigeons, which I really haven't done the research for this. I don't know why they did that, unless they were cultivating pigeons for meat, using their droppings as fertilizer, or if there was some sort of or feathers for something. I just don't know why they raised them. I don't know if messages were sent, which I think they did do that. Sent messages via pigeon. There were Egyptian beekeepers. And they saw the healing properties and stuff of honey.
The pharaoh's duty was to uphold order against chaos and provide for his people. Priests and local governors also wanted to appear as protectors of the people. However, any variation in the Nile's seasons could cause water shortages. This had devastating consequences on wheat and barley crops. The pharaoh, administrators, and priests knew they needed to demonstrate their ability to prevent such a catastrophe from happening. And so they invented the story, which would be inscribed upon the famine stela.
I wonder what Wa is. I can't remember. And yeah, there would be quite a strong swampy smell here. I've been in environments similar to this in California, and I can tell you that depending on the time of year, it is not pleasant. And if there were hippopotami nearby, it would smell even less grandiose, because they are not pretty smelling things. And those are lotus plants. This chap looks like they're making bread.
The story begins with the pharaoh worried for his people. The Nile hasn't flooded in years, and his people are starving. In search of the origins of the flooding, Djoser seeks out Khnum, the protector god of the region and the source of the drought. Djoser gives the god offerings and orders his priests to restore the temple of Khnum. These offerings please the god, and the floods are restored. This story was intended to highlight the importance of the deity in everyone's daily lives, while also demonstrating the crucial role that the priests and the king played in feeding and protecting the people of Egypt.
This was before the Great Pyramid, in the time of Imhotep, Djoser. And there was also the sort of a turning point. It wasn't just the pharaoh that held the extreme of power. After the pharaoh donated all that land to the Temple of Khnum, priests of various gods obtained higher prominence. And there weren't any gators in ancient Egypt, but there were plenty of crocodiles. And the Nile had plenty of them. Yeah, they are coming through. Sorry, I got a bit carried away with my own commentary. This guy doing laundry. Yep. Sobek did. I'm sure that I'm sure I could find a quote-unquote live one, even in this version. Somewhere along the Nile. So let's have a go. They don't usually hang around the towns. They're definitely more prominent in the, the Assassin's Creed game, and they're not nice. So in this game, it's Care Bears, sunshine, rainbows, fluffy bunnies. Today, I think in Egypt, the crocodiles are quite gone. So are lions. There's no more lions or even hippos. The climate has changed so much that it's unsustainable for their habitat. And I would have thought by now I'd have seen something actually. That's a frog, that noise. Well, I wonder if they don't have them about in the Care Bear version. That would be an ideal place for them to hang out. Cranes. Yeah, I wonder if their ferocity is such that they would only be like in Crocodilopolis or something like that. There should be... Oh, there we go. I'm just thinking that especially here there should be lots. There's not a lot of people. Well, there we go. Crocodiles. And they won't attack in this version. So you can be buddies. Mouth-breathing croc youth. There's some pretty good details. I know. Aren't you absolutely beautiful? Look at these creatures, they're so gorgeous. You got to treat them with a lot of respect though. And they also blend in their environment well, so even though I was running along the bank, they're easy to miss, but you can definitely hear them when you get close enough. Crocky. They do seem to respond a little bit to somebody getting into their environment. They don't seem overly happy to have you stand right next to them. But I like how they have different sizes and stuff. They're not all copy and paste. I think wildlife was... Oh, domesticated animals. Domesticated animals. This will be a quickie. I always told myself that one of these days he's gonna get killed by a gator or a hippo or something, and it was not what I expected. I thought it would be something else, number one, but number two, when it happened, I felt really bad because I appreciate the work that he was doing. Sounded like a jerk. A creep. That looks like a Roman, actually. This is a pretty area. I'm trying to remember it based on what I'm seeing. And I'm thinking it is near Saqqara. But I'm going to take a look. This is... Oh, near Dionysius. So... I meant to say the Fayum, not Saqqara. Derp. That's Saqqara. I meant to say the Fayum. But I didn't know the territory. Crocodilopolis. Near there. I can't find Crocodilopolis on here. Oh, it was right in front of my face. So it's right here. Okay. Anyway, that was... Oh, jeez. Are you talking about real life? Oh, no, sorry. The character... The text on my phone is rather small. So, sorry for the miscommunication.
Welcome to Domesticated Animals of Ancient Egypt.
Cute kitties. And these are carbon copy kitties.
Agriculture and domesticated livestock were introduced 6,000 years ago. Archaeologists have found traces of cattle, donkeys, pigs, and dogs. Dromedary are thought to have been introduced during the Persian invasion.
Invaders always leave the conquered with something, but they always take more. Otherwise, there would be no point to invading and colonizing. But of the invaders, of all the invaders that have taken a foothold, the Persians and the Hittites were probably the least favored.
Pets were deeply cherished in ancient Egypt. Many illustrations of children often include a pet in the depiction.
And it's a nice, smooth little cat figurine. But I think it's something of a child's toy. It's something that paled in majesty and quality to something that would probably made out of a nicer material that was either broken because it was an idol or melted down into something that was turned into something else. So I don't mean to be overly negative when it comes to that, but when I see such attention brought to figurines like that, even though they have value, I think it paints a picture of looking more primitive than it was. But look at a Greek child's toy or a Roman child's toy, and it would not be very impressive. Yeah, the Greeks asserting and patrolling, reminding the people who's in charge. I just like the environment.
One of ancient Egypt's most iconic animals, the cat, wasn't adopted into their daily life until the Middle Kingdom. Since they were so highly capable of killing snakes and rodents, cats were present throughout every period. However, they only became pets sometime during the Middle Kingdom. Prince Thutmose, son of Amenhotep III, had his cat Tamu laid to rest in its own sarcophagi.
Tamu. The Egyptians liked onomatopoeic names for things. So a cat, the word for cat was Mea. I think a female cat, or a nickname of somebody based off a cat, like Kitty, would be Mayat. And like a bunch of cats would be Mayu. And the word for a dog was Iwiu. And the word for a donkey was Ea. There, kitty. Try to get a closer look. I like some of these details. This one looks like these two might look like copy and paste. Oh, I had more of a brown face. Now, even in the most ancient of times, I would be hard-pressed to believe that these villages, their construction looked so much more pristine and better. They made a lot of these buildings out of mud brick because it never rained. And there was a lot you could do with mud brick, and they didn't have access to timber. But they did like a sense of style. There were people that painted reliefs on houses and knew that if they whitewashed them.
The earliest reference to dogs dates back to 5000 BCE. They were popular pets as they helped hunters and protected herds. They were closely linked to Anubis, the jackal-headed god. Baboons, monkeys, and even falcons were tamed as pets. Each was mummified and buried with as much ceremony as any family member.
It's 18th dynasty. That's the time of, I think, Ramses II and even Akhenaten, Amenhotep III. Just hanging out some of these places, I just think it's fun to watch. I have a few videos where I try to find a spot where I can use the clipping to not make the character visible and just play some of my favorite soundtracks from Children of the Nile and just let it loop. And different day and nighttime cycles, and I've enjoyed listening to it and watching some of it here and there. I do not know what this guy's dilemma is. What's stopping you from doing what you're doing, buddy? I'm just gonna stand here, hold this. Well, anyway, that's that. Is there anything else you'd like to see? Or did you want to call it a stream? Well, yeah, they had, especially in the Fayoum, they had kites. I don't know what the exact purpose was, but I think kites dissuaded birds from eating some of their produce. They might have been put there to please the gods visually. Yeah, we're near the Fayoum, but that is a kite. And my first guess is that they were aesthetic. Yeah, they got them in the air and left them there. And I really don't know what the purpose was. Might have just been aesthetic. See if I can. Yep. Especially the kites are mostly visible, I think, over the fields. Whip out sinew. I do wonder if it was to dissuade birds from eating dates. Those look like date palms. And that looks like a ravaged place. Well, these are interesting topics. Cultivation, building, medicine, leather and linen, artisans, evolution of pottery, the Egyptian household, beer and bread, wine, oil. If any of those topics tickle your fancy, okay. Medicine. Just a spoonful of medicine makes the knowledge go down smooth. Wait, that's not it. Sounds fine to me. And I think this might be best done in daylight, so I'm gonna go. This looks like Siwa. And it looks like an ancient Per Ankh. Like a major Per Ankh, which is actually also where medicine was bestowed.
Welcome to Ancient Egyptian Medicine.
I'm gonna switch characters. Wonder if Shadia of Eumeria. She's a cutie pie.
Evidence of advanced medical procedures have been found on mummies, and ancient Egyptians left detailed medical writings from diagnosis to follow-up treatment. One of the oldest known surgical studies is the Edwin Smith Papyrus. It's one of the first documents in history that notes an association between the integrity of the brain and cognitive functions, including cases of ocular complications and paralysis following head trauma. Vinegar-treated marble stone from Memphis was used as an anesthetic.
Now this, I'm not 100% sure what this is made of, but it looks like marble. But it also has a slight alabaster-esque look. But so if somebody said, hey, this is an alabaster pharmaceutical jar, I would have believed them.
Another similar document, the Ebers Medical Papyrus, is over 20 meters long and 30 centimeters wide. It details treatments of 48 surgical cases and contains 877 paragraphs describing various diseases. Alongside accurate and factual scientific approaches, the papyrus has more than 700 magic formulas and incantations to ward off demons and disease. This demonstrates how ancient Egyptians believed in a harmonious balance between religion and science.
And I think they were sorely mistaken mixing the two. religion is often seen as history, so mixing history with science, definitely, but mixing science and superstition is horrendously vulgar. Oh, something went down here. I don't think he's feeling very well. People don't go to the hospital and say, "Hey guys, how's it going?"
Remedies were considered as medicine and carried by doctors and priests. Village doctors often had another job alongside their medical duties and the preparation of medicines. A cure for blindness was made of fermented honey, ochre, and coal. The science behind it was that honey functioned as an antiseptic and antibacterial, while ochre would reduce the swelling. All of their knowledge did not always suffice. Ramses II died of an infection caused by an abscessed tooth.
They didn't understand why it worked, but they had practices that actually helped with certain things. Like if you had a festering wound that was caused by bacteria, moldy bread was known to, like if you clean the wound and you put moldy bread over it, there's penicillin in a lot of bread mold, and it kills the infection. They didn't think, let's scrape the mold off and make a concoction with it, let's have them drink it and kill the germs that way. Or they would mix that in honey, some of the smarter ones. But in order to keep their position, they had to have trade secrets. So a quick drying ink that water couldn't wash away was made, but the recipes lost because the scribe's son died, and then he died, so he didn't have anybody to teach. So they gained a lot of knowledge and they lost a lot of knowledge. But some of their treatment plans were superstitious bunk, and others were really good. They were, in the ancient world, the best physicians. And I mean the ancient of the ancient. It was originally the Egyptians. They did brain surgery before anybody else, and with certain eye diseases, they were able to restore sight temporarily. This is a really run-down place. I'm guessing this is in Siwa. That Per Ankh in Siwa. I think it's Siwa. Well, I guess this concludes things for the time being. May or may not be back tonight or tomorrow, but we'll see if we can work something out. Hope you enjoyed yourself. It was always fun, and I was wondering who that cute humming came from, and I forgot that this kid likes to hum. So I think that was why I picked the more stately actor, because I was hiding him behind things so that I could make safe looping day and night videos with without any too much external sound. Anyways, fair wind for now, and I hope anyone who cared to give this a look had a kind and gentle night, and until next time,